The snow began as a whisper and became a roar, the kind that swallows sound, direction, and hope all at once. And by the time Elias realized the road was gone, the world had turned into a white wall with no beginning and no end. He pulled his coat tighter around his 3 children, their tiny bodies trembling against his chest, their cries weak from exhaustion rather than fear, because fear had already burned itself out hours ago. Christmas Eve was supposed to be warm lights and bread on the table, even if the table was old and the bread was thin. But fate had other plans, dragging them into the open wilderness when the wagon broke and the nearest town vanished behind curtains of snow. Elias sat down because his legs no longer answered him, sinking into the cold earth as snow piled onto his shoulders like the weight of every failure he carried as a father. The children clung to him instinctively, bare feet numbed, faces red and cracked, breath shallow, and he whispered stories he barely remembered from his own childhood, stories about stars that never go out and nights that always end in morning, though he wasn't sure he believed them anymore. Somewhere in the distance, a cabin light flickered, or maybe it was only his mind begging for mercy, but the storm howled louder, erasing possibility. He pressed his forehead to theirs, creating a small circle of warmth no fire could rival, and promised them he would not let go, even if the snow buried his name from the world. If this story already has your heart tightening, remember that stories like these are why this channel exists, because some nights are cold, and shared stories are the only warmth we have, so stay with us. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys like this one. Mara felt the storm before she saw it, a deep ache in her chest that told her something was wrong long before. The wind slammed into her door and rattled the walls of the cabin, like a warning from the sky. She had been waiting, staring at the candle by the window, counting the minutes since Elias and the children left, each second stretching longer than the last, until waiting became unbearable and fear turned into motion. Wrapping herself in a thin dress and shawl, she stepped into the blizzard, each step a battle against ice and doubt, calling their names until her voice cracked and disappeared into the storm. Snow cut her face, soaked her hair, numbed her hands, but she kept moving because love does not ask for permission from the weather. Then she saw them, Elias on the ground. The children pressed into him like fragile birds, and something broke open inside her, a mix of terror and relief so powerful it nearly dropped her to her knees. She ran, slipping, falling, crawling the last distance, reaching out as if touch alone could pull them back from the edge of the world. Elias looked up, his eyes glassy, shocked not by the cold but by the miracle of her presence, and for a moment, the storm paused in meaning if not in strength. Mara gathered them, covering the children with her own body, rubbing their hands, whispering prayers and promises into ears that barely heard but somehow understood. They could not move toward the cabin. The snow was too deep, the children too weak, but in that moment it didn't matter. The warmth they created together pressed close, heartbeats sinking in the chaos, was stronger than walls or roofs. If you've ever felt lost in a storm, literal or emotional, this story is for you. And subscribing means you'll never face those storms alone again. The blizzard raged on, relentless and cruel. Yet inside that small circle of bodies, something extraordinary happened. Time slowed, breath deepened, and the children's cries softened into whimpers. Then silence, not the silence of surrender, but of rest. Elias felt it first, a strange heat spreading through his chest. Not from survival instinct, but from love fully realized, the kind that burns without consuming. Mara sang softly, her voice shaking yet steady enough to anchor them to the present. A lullaby passed down through generations who had also known hunger, cold, and loss. Snow covered their backs, but their fronts stayed warm, protected by arms and intention. And Elias realized something that would stay with him forever. That shelter is not built from wood alone, but from refusal, from choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. He thought of all the nights he had blamed himself for not providing enough, not being enough, and here he was, providing the one thing no poverty could steal, presence. The children stirred, tiny hands gripping fabric, feet pressing against warmth, their bodies responding to love like plants to sunlight. Somewhere beyond the storm, church bells rang faintly, carried by the wind or maybe by memory, and Elias closed his eyes. Not to sleep but to pray, not for rescue but for strength to hold on. Stories like this remind us why humanity survives its worst nights. And if you believe storytelling matters, subscribing helps keep these voices alive.
When the storm finally loosened its grip, dawn crept in quietly, as if afraid to disturb what had been earned through suffering. Neighbors found them hours later, half buried in snow, alive together, breathing warmth into one another like a single organism built from love. The children survived, not because the night was kind, but because their parents refused to let it win. As they were carried toward safety, Elias looked back once, not at the storm, but at the place where they had sat, realizing that spot held more meaning than any house he had ever owned. Christmas morning arrived not with gifts or feasts, but with the simple miracle of survival, of hands still holding hands. In the years that followed, the children would remember this night not as the time they almost died, but as the night they learned what home truly meant. And for everyone listening now, let this be a reminder. Warmth is not always found in walls. Hope is not always loud, and love is strongest when everything else is stripped away. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of what truly matters, subscribe to the channel, because stories like these don't just entertain, they keep us human.